He said, thank you. I want to tell you something. That nobody else in that room knew all the answers to all those questions either. But no one's raising their hand. No one's being willing to look like they don't know what they're talking about. Thank you for being the guy that was willing to be the wrong guy, maybe, and be the wrongest guy in the room. That really stuck with me. That's what I needed to hear from my leader, to say, it's okay, you're safe.
What's going on, everybody? It's George here from NVISION. I've got a special guest here today that I met about a year and a half ago. We were both facilitators at Toronto Metropolitan University, teaching a generation of new marketers who are getting into the industry. And I'm grateful that I came across him and we've had some great conversations. I've got Rhys Mohun here, who is the founder of Formentor Labs. And he helps consumers and e-commerce brands grow revenue using evidence, not opinions. Fair to say?
Fair to say.
Awesome. You blend science, empathy, which I really loved, and experimentation to help marketing teams move faster and learn with confidence. And we are going to talk shop today and have a lot of fun in this conversation. So thank you for being here, man.
Thank you for inviting me.
Really
Lovely.
Really enjoy this. And I really enjoyed, what I really enjoyed about you is actually our very last day at TMU when all the students presented, and we had a chance to catch up at the end. And you kind of opened up about, your start in the world of marketing and what you've been doing with your organization and how you kind of got into a lot of split testing and really rapid style split testing, right, at Formentor. And I just wanted to start talking about that and say thank you for being here. So that said, take a minute, introduce yourself. I'd love for the audience here to know,
Sure.
a little bit about you and a little bit about your agency.
Sure, thanks, yeah. I came out of school with big ambitions, big dreams, starting my own business, but I graduated into the recession, and I found that to be, let's call it a challenging environment to find the way to start a business. So I went into the next closest thing that I could, and I got myself into startups. I wanted to rub elbows with founders and see how it was done and figure out how to grow a business. And I accidentally just fell in love with that space. I just love the scrappiness of it. I love the hustle, the struggle of it. So it was a good experience. I moved up into it, where there's a corporate environment there. I learned to scale and think bigger.
Yep.
And that was a career-defining role for me, and we'll talk about that probably.
For sure we will, yeah.
Inform me how I can do this for other teams out in the world.
Yeah.
And then, about a year and a half ago now, I started my own consultancy, Formentor Labs.
Yeah.
And I'm teaching teams to use empathy, to learn to fail gracefully, to support each other. And then, once that foundation's set, they can run rapid tests, finding evidence, focusing on the things that actually materially seem to be working, and help their leaders make decisions with the evidence that they need, and make sure that the team has the skills to go and get, tests, evidence, research to support big strategic decisions. There's a gap there. That's what I try to solve.
Yeah, and we see it every day as marketers, if you're really paying attention to the nuances and what's actually taking place and what's actually, what opportunities actually exist. I mean, that's why I love marketing. That's why I got into what we do, which is we can base our decisions on data and good evidence, right? And make rational, logical decisions, because some bad decisions, and I'm sure you've seen it, end up costing a lot of
I've made them.
Yeah.
I've made plenty of bad decisions, right?
Yeah.
So, there's I call it nobody wants to look dumb. It's provocative for a reason, but that's kind of the thing that's in the way of a lot of what we're doing these days. And the decisions around, a lot of the AI conversation is fueled by, I want to look like I know what I'm talking about. But the growth is in the struggle. The growth is in the failure part and the willingness to say, I don't really know, but I'm putting my hand up with what I see, my interpretation. And here's how I think we perceive. That takes skill, I think training, and takes a little bit of leadership as well.
It also takes the willingness to accept failure and learn from it, right?
Yes.
And I've been a big advocate of that here at our agency for years, where I'm like, it's all right to fail, as long as you learn something from it.
Yeah.
As long as there's a takeaway to say, let's not make the same mistake twice or thrice.
Can happen.
Yeah.
My favorite word is interpretation.
Yeah.
We're all data-driven. We all follow the data. I've checked everybody's LinkedIn. We all have it. We're all data-driven. Check. Why do we still argue and debate every day?
Yeah.
If we're data-driven and we're following the numbers, how can we still possibly fight every day in the boardroom, disagree, be disappointed? It's because we all have different orientations, we have different experiences, we have different lenses with which we see that thing. In fact, a lot of it's goals. So we aren't the same human beings. We aren't making decisions from the same platform. What I try to teach teams is your data's a tool, it's a set, but how you guys organize and rationalize, live your principles and make decisions as sort of a unit, that takes some work, because you're going to debate all day. And debate, by the way, we'll get to this. Debate is the number one thing that slows teams down. I have all the receipts. Debate and the inability to make a decision is has a far bigger impact on any team's velocity than skill, than designing an idea, than coming up with an idea. It's a debate. It's the debate that kills you.
Yeah. You get a lot of mixed opinions, I'm sure. And I've sat in many debates, some heated, but mostly logical, and we end up getting to a common ground. You said something interesting there, and I'm going kind of off track a little bit, because from everything you just said, I find how important are values in the direction and the decisions and in the debates, ensuring that, yes, evidence is one thing, but the values of the organizations that you're working with and coaching through on the things that you do well, how important is that?
Foundational. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
It feels really different when you're working on a team, small or large.
Yeah.
When you do live those values and you actually, it can sound a little woo-woo, I know, but when you actually use the value in your explanation, when you talk about, hey, well, I want to solve for the customer first, if that's one of your values. Sure. You can use that. And it's not manipulative. It's none of those things. It's just grounding your point of view and your statement into the thing you've all agreed to ground it in.
Right.
So when you share in a way that actually leans on those values all declared, then great. I like to say it's how you want to behave in the dark.
Yeah. It's a great way to put it, actually.
Experimentation by its nature is right up against uncertainty, and that presents a lot of risk. And the most boring way I could possibly describe my job is I help teams manage risk, which is not sexy, and so I don't sell it that way. But risk is the thing we're all controlling for, and once we've grounded ourselves in how we debate and how we talk about the steps we're going to take, what our limits are, then you can thrive. That's where creativity comes.
I think it is sexy. Maybe it's just because I'm in this industry, but I think a lot of C-level executives look at risk mitigation as really sexy, because the last thing they want is to be taking unknown risk without the potential. If you're, I was talking to actually a fractional CFO yesterday, and the way he broke down what he would like from marketing is very heavily weighted towards the reduction of risk. I'm going to make this investment. What am I going to yield back in return? And I'm not willing to take this risk until that is clearly.
What do I need to know? Yep.
Yeah. And which was, ties back to what you're saying. So let's get into, you've said something that was interesting to me. You say that CMOs are overwhelmed and still making calls without evidence. Where in marketing is this happening the most? Is it messaging, on channels, on budgets? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I mean, probably all over, but I think the area where I like to help the most is helping them decide strategy and where they can lean in next. It's not a criticism when I say people are making decisions without evidence. The environment today is moving so fast. I mean, when has technology changed faster than it has today or tomorrow?
Next week it'll be different.
And so there's just a tremendous amount of pressure to, I hate this phrase, but get it right.
Yeah.
And we kind of forget sometimes as a society that part of getting it right is getting it wrong first.
Yeah.
And the speed with which we're trying to operate is trying to get results before we actually take the steps. And that's a generalization, but the steps would be gathering evidence, pausing on a decision before we actually make it, and asking our teams with precision and a little bit of skill in terms of, here's what I would need to know. Let's go run some experiments. Again, it's a skill to do that, but this is the type of evidence I'm going to need to see. Here's a threshold. Here's what I'm looking for. And then giving them the autonomy to find that themselves and removing yourself as a leader from the equation.
Right.
That's the right way to operate. That's where speed is. But there are guardrails, there are meetings, there's rituals that you can be running to help unlock that autonomy for your team so that as a CMO, you can trust your team, and trust is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You can trust your team to bring you the sort of evidence that will help you make a big decision. Are we going through this channel? Are we expanding? Are we adopting this feature? Are we cutting the segment? Are we focusing on this segment? Those are big decisions.
And how much of that do you do, like when you're devising the hypotheses, like if we do this, we anticipate, an outcome of that, X and Y.
Yep.
Like when you're presenting that to a CMO who perhaps has been set in their ways, but they bring us on into their organizations to help them make good decisions. How often do you deviate from what their perceived outcomes are going to be and what you're actually seeing when you start looking at the evidence? What is there? Do you see a huge disconnect typically, or
I think what you're asking is what I call willingness to be wrong, and it's a prerequisite for the teams that I get to work with.
Yeah.
Tell you what, I learned how to be wrong. Let me tell you that story. I'm not a CMO, but my smaller scale story will still apply. I started my career in startups, and I was in many, but 2 of them I managed to take from 0 to Series A funding, which it took experience and a little bit of look back to realize what an accomplishment that really was.
Sure. Yeah.
But I came out of those experiences feeling crummy. I felt like a failure. I had what I can only call platinum level imposter syndrome, even coming out of raising funds, because I've learned to appreciate my successes a lot better as an adult now. But in my early 20s, when I was really hustling, I only saw the next thing. And we celebrated the funds coming in. We had a big party, and then honestly, the next day I came into work early because I was so nervous that I didn't know how to get us from we got from 1 to 10 ARR.
Yeah.
I didn't know in my early career. I didn't know how to do 10 to 100 million. I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I was terrified. And to me, what that felt like emotionally was failure, unpreparedness, and a bit of like imposter syndrome. We talked about that. That's terrible. Like I don't want my story to repeat for other people, so I'm trying my best to help teach teams you can be wrong. That's a part of the process.
Yeah.
What fixed it for me was being seen, being validated, and that would happen at my next role. So I didn't know how to grow a startup beyond that stage, and I felt like I had to.
Mm-hmm.
Of course I didn't have to. I was young. I didn't have the experience. Why would I put that kind of pressure on myself?
Sure.
But I did. So I found my way into a larger role. I went into Intuit. We had some partnerships with them.
Yeah.
I networked my way in, and they wanted me to help grow their e-commerce business, but particularly they wanted me to help them grow their experiments practice. I remember coming out of my final successful interview with Intuit, and I asked them, hey, you probably have a great pipeline of candidates. I would just love to know what was special about me. What made you choose me? And of course, I hid all the sort of struggle and the experiments and the things that didn't work for my startup days, and I focused on the successes only. But they clearly pulled out of my story that I was scrappy and I knew how to run experiments. And our phrase was, we doubled what worked, dropped what didn't.
Yeah.
But at that time, there was very little structure to my work, and there wasn't a lot of discipline around the experiments. I don't think I ever called anything an experiment in those days. It was just the way we operated.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to tell me in that room, in my big corporate, imposter level role, hey, Rhys, what we really wanted to see from you, thank you, is you bring a level of experimentation and scrappiness to this team that we're honestly kind of missing right now. We're going to bring that back. Walking out of that room, like being validated and seen for the struggle that I was trying to hide all those years.
Yeah.
And that's the story they wanted from me, was just explosive. Like it was honestly a career defining role for me to be able to learn there's a practice here, the way we make decisions, the way we struggle, all of that struggle and being wrong all the time and things that didn't work was validated. And it just lit me up. And that's where I did some of my best work.
I love that story because it started with vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
Where it was like, am I doing the right things? And we all have it to this day. I was shooting a podcast 2 weeks ago with a buddy of mine, Jeremy, who's an author. And I've always had this imposter syndrome because I'm like, Jeremy's an author. He's never going to want to talk to a guy like me. Like, what have I accomplished? I really value books and people who would take the time to read and write. And his book was brilliant. And so when I had him on here, I kind of opened up and said, man, I'm so grateful for you to be here. Like, I can't believe I'm interviewing you. And he's like, what are you talking about? You have like the weirdest imposter syndrome. But that vulnerability, much like you had this moment with Intuit validating you, for me, it was like, wait a second, man. He reversed it on me. He's like, I'm so grateful to be here sitting with you. I'm like, yeah. What?
Yeah.
Really? I'm like, okay, yeah.
The things we see in each other, right? Like we see those things in each other that we want to emulate. And yeah, it's funny. You can put a pin in that story. Actually, speaking of vulnerability, I think the sort of pin in that story and the day that really cemented for me that, like, as a leader, there's something I can actually change and do and change the energy in a room and be important. And it's actually the title of the talk that I give these days. It's called Being Wrongest in the Room. My gosh, I don't know, 3rd or 4th day in that role. And I'm having that sort of like, skip level meet with the head of the company. I met the head of Canada. Yeah. And I sheepishly going to walk up and knock on the door, and he turns around and honest to God, like the phrase he said was, hey, there he is, the wrongest guy in the room. And I froze. Right? Like, it's my 4th day. What did I do already? What have I done wrong? What have I done? And you probably see the color leave my face. It was relax. It's a compliment. Sit down. what he was trying to tell me, and this is what I'm hoping leaders tell their leaders, marketer leaders, CMOs, they need to hear this. Thanks for being in that meeting. What I was doing was I was raising my hand a lot, trying to figure out what ideas were, what acronyms were. Intuit uses every letter of the alphabet in acronyms. I wanted to just learn and know what it was. I raised my hand a lot.
Yeah.
The ADHD helps, by the way.
Yeah.
Asking 1,000 questions and having the next one ready before they finish their answer. That's me. And he said, thank you. I want to tell you something. Nobody else in that room knew all the answers to all those questions either, but no one's raising their hand. No one's being willing to look like they don't know what they're talking about. Thank you for being the guy that was willing to be the wrong guy, maybe, and be the wrongest guy in the room. That really stuck with me. That's what I needed to hear from my leader, to say, it's okay, you're safe.
Yeah.
It's okay to look like you don't know this yet.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that in my career. I didn't have that in my early days. I didn't have a person in my life or my career to tell me, which is not right, that what you're doing is part of the process. The failing, the asking the questions, that's all part of it. You don't just get to show the highlight reel. You get to work on this stuff. And I know how much content is out there now, today, about failure and testing experiments, but a decade and a half ago, that was Eric Brews.
Yeah.
That was, Sean Ellis growth. That was an epiphany. That wasn't norm. And so I'm really hoping to bring that light to teams, especially, and into their leaders as well, that I want them to hear from someone that what you're doing is great. Great failure. High five. That was a bomb. What did we learn? What's next? Okay. Putting some structure to that and feeling validated and seeing that what they're doing is working.
Yeah, right on, man. I will, cheer you on from the sidelines, and I cheer my team on, and companies that I work with, and we're like, we failed.
Yeah.
Race.
Good.
But
What a doozy.
yeah. Here's what we got out of it. All right.
Yeah.
So let's get back to Formentor for a second,
Mhm.
because I want to know from your perspective, running your agency, what's the most common marketing decisions that are being made right now based on gut? I've seen a lot of decisions being like where data isn't part of the equation, which isn't my ideal, the circumstance to be part of. What are you seeing? Are people making decisions on gut with, like you mentioned, AI, right? What are you seeing?
I'd say two things. I'd say the evergreen problem with this space is more on delivery of like content messaging, even just campaigns going live without having any degree of measurement in a isolated test environment first. Wouldn't you love to know that the thing you've spent maybe $100,000, maybe $1 million building and creating is actually going to work for the person you want it to work for?
Right.
A lot of things are launched without any sort of prior, any sort of B experiment and test.
Yeah.
So I'd say the first area where I focus with a lot of those teams is, here's how you run a quick little check, a quick little experiment to see, does this have legs or not? Thank goodness you do this. I've got stories in my career as well where things like, thank goodness we didn't go that direction.
Right.
You mentioned AI. I think the same, I'm generalizing here, but I think the same thing is kind of happening. I talk to CMOs every day in this space, and the answer is some version of, okay, we just aren't quite prepared yet to cement our, AI strategy, our SOPs, and how we operationalize as a team. But once we get there, we're gonna be really rock. And I want to counter that with another point of view, which is AI today is the worst it's ever going to be, right? Like it's only going to get better from here on out. This is the worst version of it that we're working with.
Yeah.
In the right field, in the right applications, it's great. I caution people not to ever remove the thinking. We'll cover that, of
course.
too.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the right applications, it can really shortcut a lot of work. It can expand your thinking. That's where we use it in your creativity.
Yes.
But you still need humans to facilitate, be creative, and be empathetic. How can we possibly expect, the way I did when I was in startups, trying to figure out my way and being right all the time, how can we possibly expect that we're going to know how our team is going to operationalize with standard operating procedures and velocity when this thing we're using is changing every couple of months?
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And I hope CMOs see this as an opportunity to show their vulnerability, to make a quick decision with the right amount of evidence. I call it picking a lane, pick a horse. I mean, people are still choosing between Anthropic and ChatGPT and where they're going. Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Great. What can we control right now? We don't know which of those is going to be. The Gemini's popping up lately, right? Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So don't just pick a lane, show your team you're vulnerable, make a decision, say, we're going to try this. For now, this is working. And we're not going to cement anything until we know with evidence that this is going to work for a long time. It's got longevity, and off we go.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a different version of that from CMOs. I'd love to hear, we don't know what our AI strategy or procedures are going to look like even a year from now. But here's what we're doing today. Here's what's working. This is really great. And this we're still working on. We're workshopping this.
Yeah. What I see a lot right now is just output based like initiatives where like use this to do this. Let me see. And it's like, okay, well, let's go back to what outcome are we working towards? And that's been the biggest challenge is like when the conversations are being had around the outcomes, it's blurry to organizations that I'll speak to, or, you know, various stakeholders within organizations have different ideas of what the ideal outcomes look like.
Yes. And that's a big problem.
It is a huge problem.
I focus a lot of my mission is to help 1,000 younger generation marketers run their first experiment. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I want them to feel confident to do that. I'm focused on the younger generation because they need our help. I won't go into the ocean of complexities they have as a generation right now.
Right.
But the least we can do is give them the skills to accelerate their careers and find something in this messy job market that they can tack onto their resume and say, I'm good at this. Here's my accomplishments. Here are my achievements. And here's what I want to do. AI coming in to disrupt all that and to have leaders say, we want AI to do the thinking and to do the messy stuff. Well, humans operationalize is the absolute wrong approach. And we're cutting our legs out by thinking that talent is just going to find a way to catch up.
Yeah,
it's not. And so I really hope leaders in this space are realizing that the next set of decision makers in their org are right now being told to let something else do the thinking for them.
Isn't that counterproductive though to like everything that you believe in, which is fail and you know, almost be proud of it as long as you learn something from it. You know, it will get to a point where I think the AI is going to be so dependent on so that failure doesn't occur. And how would you as a younger generation, if you didn't have the chance to like explore and experiment, if the dependency of the organization is heavily on the tool, the thing, you know, I don't know, man. I struggle with it too. Having 4 kids, and I know you've got 2 young ones who are eventually going to get into the workforce. And what's in it for them if they haven't had the chance to learn from mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, my oldest struggles with the mistakes she makes. We try really hard to teach her that, of course, you know, you made the right decision. It just didn't go the way you wanted, and that's okay. We're proud of you for trying. That's an effort-based reward, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier, George, that was something along the lines of, forgive me, it was like, we're going to use AI to be right all the time. I understand your sentiment. Yeah, I think a lot of people picture that's the sort of future as well. I caution using LLMs today. A lot of people don't like this phrase. It's the average of the past. What you're getting is the most likely thing someone else has said before.
Yeah.
Where does creativity factor into that? Where does risk and edge and doing the first thing come from? Would an AI have said that hundreds of thousands and then soon millions of people will get into a stranger's car to go from A to B? Would an AI have predicted that? No. And so these synthetic audiences, which we've heard of, no. You know, we need that human interaction and the interface and the questions and how are you doing and the empathy and the facilitation. And those are skills that AI absolutely, even at its best, on a great day, won't be able to circumvent or to shortcut. And so those are skills I'm hoping the next generation of marketers will lean into. Empathy, listening, reading body language, understanding how their customers are really feeling, the problems that they're having. There are 2 outcomes from any level of experiment. Qualitative experiments, interviews, talking about you, discovery, research. It's just finding the presence of a real problem. Hey, a number of people have used different language, but they're really struggling with this. They can't book on time to take advantage of the sale, whatever your space is. They can't, they can't find a property that matches all their requirements and stay under budget. And in the current view, they're not able to check all their boxes off. Jobs to be done. To find the presence of a problem takes empathy and listening and learning and all sorts of things that a lot of teams tend to skip. That's the evidence piece. And they jump straight into A/B tests or quants or whatever, thinking, I want to see the size of this problem without having validated that the problem is real, using language that the customers really feel and the emotions that's behind it. You can, think about it. You can even use AI to do this. And this is one of the things I do use AI for. You can present the same problem and the same value prop 18 different ways, written for a different type of persona, and you generate a different landing page or email or ad or whatever. How do you know which one's going to work? You could waste all your traffic and test it and finally get to it, or you could sit with 5 to 8 people. That's the limit. 5 to 8. You could sit with 5 to 8 people and ask them how they felt facing that problem, what they're dealing with every day, how life at home is, what's going on in their mind, and get to know them really well.
Mhm.
And you can skip months of A/B tests because you've uncovered exactly and you've heard it from your client.
Isn't it amazing how that sample size can tell you so much more?
Yeah, you
Like,
just want to find the presence of it.
Yeah. So you mentioned like qualifiable, insights, which is great. I call it observational analytics. Like I'm just sitting there and I'm asking the questions I need to, and my client to understand, because I can go back with quantifiable data and say, here's all the brilliant things that we can do based on this data. And it's like when you hear the customer tell you what's happening in their industry or in their business, it's like, wait a second, pause. Okay, tell me more. And I'm going to now double down on that because you are the industry expert in your field or whatever the case may be, right?
And yet, do you know who the worst person to write your website copy, your email copy, your ads? Who's the worst person in the org to write the copy?
The leader, the owner.
Why?
Because they're not talking to everybody else who is dealing with the customers.
Maybe. They could be talking with their customers, but guess what else they have? They are close enough to both the problem, because they've dealt with it for a while.
Yeah.
And they're close enough to their solution that they know there's an end in sight.
Right.
They know with our enterprise plan, you'll never have this problem again. Great. The customer who's suffering, who's in the struggle, they don't know there's a fit yet. They haven't been educated. They're using different language to elucidate on their problem. They're looking for options. They're comparing. They didn't even know this space may exist a little while ago. So I use the plumber analogy. The worst person to write the landing page for a plumbing website, forgive me, is the plumber, because he's going to talk about, this is now going to demonstrate how much of a non-plumber I am, gaskets, and whatever, and fittings. And we have a wide selection of the world's best cement glue that we use. We still use copper, right? Copper cement. They're going to describe that. That's not what the guy on the phone holding a bowl under his ceiling is asking, right? He's not asking those things. He's asking, can you fix it in time? Is my house going to be okay? And can you get here in an hour?
Not what kind. Tell me about
your gasket, right? The person who should write your webpage is your customer, ideally pre-solution, going, oh my God, how do I deal with this? What's the first step? Who's an expert? Who can I trust? I've had my own house woes. We had a leaky roof last year, so I've been there. I've been through the experience of panic. I need a fast, forget vitamin sales. I need like a firefighting solution. Like, help me get out of this situation. And you're quickly running through testimonials and so on, but it's fast. Depending on your market. If you're a slower sales cycle, they have more time. But at the end of the day, your customer, and they're, forgive me, but they're suffering and their experience with the problem, uses an entirely different logic and language than a founder will, presenting, his features to solve this problem and so on. They're the worst person to write that copy. So you need to be getting in front of people and asking those questions.
There's a wealth of knowledge there that people don't tap into, unfortunately, right? So speaking of like metrics and data, I hear a lot of leaders, whether they're the C-suite or whoever we're dealing with, the heads of marketing in the organizations, they say they trust data. Based on Formentor and what you guys are doing, what do you think leaders trust? What kind of data do they trust the least? Which one?
Qualitative data.
Qualitative, yeah.
Yeah, it can feel. I still haven't got my finger on the pulse as to why. I don't know why the reaction is this, but there's a dismissiveness around doing the research, sitting and listening to stories, as opposed to going straight to data and quant, because numbers feel, I guess, smart. Maybe they feel good. There is just a tremendous amount of, I think the word I'll use is waste, when you jump straight to quant, because there's a great analogy. Who was it? It was a ship sailing analogy. I'm going to butcher it, but the idea is that if you don't even know what you're looking for or where you're heading, you can't possibly measure speed, knots, whatever. What's the point in measuring when you don't even know directionally
destination
where you're heading? Quant won't do that. There's no version of that where it tells a cohesive story about what you're trying to test, what your strategy is, and how you're doing it. It's funny you mentioned that, because we talk all day about strategy, and at this level we should be making more strategic versus tactical decisions. I see a lot of tactical experiments not tied to the thing that we're trying to learn. There's absolutely one-to-one muscle tissue, fiber connectivity between the experiments you can be running in your market and the most important thing your org is doing right now. And yet, to skip any part of that step or that sequence is just shooting yourself in the foot.
So with that then, like in terms of, okay, so let's assume we put quant on the shelf
Mhm.
to begin with, right?
Mhm.
Like
It's coming. It's
Coming.
coming.
right.
You can't do it without it, but it comes second. Yes.
So before an organization commits to a campaign or a theme in their messaging, positioning, whatever, what evidence do you feel should exist before making that commit?
There are a couple of degrees.
Yeah.
So we call it strength of evidence. So there are a couple of different degrees of evidence. We all know how much we love to hate best practice and so on. It's evidence. It's low level. And if it's all you have, it's what you need to use. But really what we're looking for is degrees. So there's obviously first party evidence, which is the best.
Yep.
This has worked here in a similar context for a similar channel. And so we're going to lean on that as not proof, but strong evidence that this next thing is also probably going to work. And you can stack it. It can become more and more compelling.
Yep.
A VP marketing or director might need less evidence to make a channel decision. A CMO should and probably will demand a much higher bar of evidence. And this is kind of what I coach. Like, what's the right level of bar to demand of your team?
Sure.
What kind of evidence do I need to make to invest in market, to invest in channel, to invest in processes, even to make a big team hire? Like, what are the things we need to know exists in the market and can show us a signal back before we do it? But it takes all those steps. And you have to be doing the legwork and the setup to make sure you're organized around those strategic things you're trying to move, and laddering that back up. And it's quite simple. It's goals-based structure. There's the org and the sort of one metric that matters. What are we all pushing towards? And then you can ladder in team-wide metrics, the inputs that they make into those, and then the work you do every day. Maybe you're an email marketer. Maybe you're product retention. Maybe you're acquisition and ads. As long as you can see your work ladder right up to the thing you're trying to move, then everybody can participate and experiment. And that's what really moves the needle, getting everybody there.
Yeah. So interesting when you have everything working cohesively. In marketing, one of the things we lean on is attribution, right? And I find that teams make mistakes with attribution quite a bit, and understanding what attribution truly means.
Yeah.
Do you see that as well?
It was the first thing I fixed it into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Well, yeah. So please don't consider this like throwing shade or
no, not about. We're big into it, fans. MailChimp partners. We love the company.
When I'm going to back this up because I think the problem started in the boardroom. When we don't know what to ask of our teams, they may not know, again, skills. They may not know what it is to deliver back as evidence. The ask comes first. It does start with leadership. No one asked, in this case, the US experimentation teams and the product teams, that the most important thing at that time in a quarter was revenue, not user growth. It was revenue. That was a principle and decision we were all leaning into. Given the choice, I often coach trade-offs as principles. Given a choice, we choose A over B. Here's why. At that time, revenue is more important to Intuit. And yet the team hadn't set up any measurement, any attribution to see whether revenue is being affected. They only knew conversion rate, growth, sort of funnel metrics. It was actually the number 2 guy at Intuit. He was the head of US, and he tapped me on my 3rd month and was terrified to be named in this giant 1,000-person meeting. What? And he tapped me saying, I want to do what Canada's doing, because by the way, Canada rules. Canada has been doing great work in experimentation, being wrong, figuring out how to work. And our model of finding evidence and bringing that into a measured, instrumented experiment was first starting with revenue. Can we actually see if we can make an effect with this change in the market that at the end of the day, all the way down through the funnel, affects revenue? When I sat with some of these US teams who hadn't instrumented properly, we did what's called a back test.
Okay.
They had run 17 experiments that year trying to grow the business, and they had all, in their minds, failed. I think all except for one. One might have succeeded. And it wasn't even statistically significant, which means you really can't trust that data at the time. That didn't sit right. They should have won more. And I looked at the designs, the type of work that they were doing, and we had done similar things in Canada that were wildly successful. They had been set up to measure whether more visitors became customers, signed up, created an account, all that sort of work. In their case, they hadn't.
Okay.
They dropped. Well, guess what? Just about every experiment I ran successfully in Canada, measuring revenue, also lost customers. But we were willing to make that trade. We knew that if we could get more money into the business because they were buying higher tiers, they were coming back, retention was higher, lifetime value. We knew if we could make that trade at the cost of, in our case, free users who weren't necessarily ready to buy,
right,
we would take that trade any day. They weren't set up. They weren't attributing right revenue back into the funnel. I'd say that's the first thing that leaders would need to fix. Those back tests, of those 17 experiments, had they been set up right, we found 15 others that would have been net revenue positive.
And what was it about those experiments that didn't lead to the outcome that perhaps they were assuming was going to be the outcome, right? Was it just lack of planning? Were they looking looking at the wrong things? Like, what do you typically?
That was it. Yeah, they were looking at the wrong things.
Yeah.
The other thing I caution is not trying to measure everything. The U.S. and with their scale and their size used a system that was different than the one Canada used, which was scrappier.
Sure.
Built on exactly what we needed to do and nothing else. And the results were analyzed very differently. The process from how a U.S. team and the product team in this case was analyzing a result and making their next decision was very different than the one that Canada was using, and how we were using principles to make decisions about the one thing we were trying to change. They were measuring everything. There were dashboards. You've seen this, like analytics that look great, they look smart, they look great, and they are smart, and the team there is very talented, but they were simply measuring too many things.
Yeah.
They were waiting for a green light on every metric before they push something live. That's just not the way to go. You're going to get a complex result. You're going to get something that goes up and something that goes down. You just have to be decisive about the thing that matters the most, and whether or not within the guardrails and the constraints you give your team, you're still greenlit to go.
I've seen the most elaborate and beautiful and aesthetically eye-pleasing dashboards in the world that don't tell a single story. At the end of it, you're like, okay, these are all great pie charts and graphs and bar graphs and everything else under the sun. What is it telling me? Like, why do you guys look at this data and there's no clarity on why they're looking at it? It's just there because it's a bunch of shiny new objects that they can just stare at.
Leaders, hear me, please. If you want to help unlock your team like tomorrow, the best thing you can do is help the team solve in the room rather than have a fancy, like you mentioned, elaborate Tableau. We use Tableau, giant, like, covers everything dashboard. That's not what teams need.
Yeah.
What teams need in small little pods, the team that's focused on solving a problem, they need to know in the room, hey, did this do better than this last year, this time? Does this channel actually have the same kind of characteristics as this channel? Are they converting the same rate? Oh, hey, they aren't. That's an insight. I can use that.
Yeah.
But to have to wait to put in a data ticket, to have to wait to ask leadership, to have to like diagnose an entire Tableau dashboard is so slow. It's so slow.
Yeah.
And leaders do not have to deliver a bow-tied like dashboard for their teams. They just have to deliver the ability for teams to ask a simple question. By the way, AI is pretty good here.
Yeah.
Help me dig through our analytics and find the answer to this question in 5 minutes. Whether that means you've staffed your teams with an analyst in the room, which is what we did into it, or if you coach and skill up some of your own team, marketers who can do this, pull dashboards. I mean, it's a skill marketers need to have, right? Someone in the room has to be able to answer simple but detailed analytics, especially looking backwards so they can infer going forwards.
Yeah. And we take it to the extreme where, we try to define for our client their one key KPI. What is the one thing that is going to illustrate success of the initiatives that we're putting into practice? And so once we define that, every conversation has that as our kind of North Star. That is the thing that we're working towards. So is that thing that you're going to do tied to that thing that the customers is, we've all clearly defined collectively that this is what they're working towards, right? So our dashboard, we try to actually simplify it a lot for visibility and clarity, and it's a lot less friction for anybody, because it's like you can get so distracted and inundated with stuff that means nothing.
And it's intimidating.
I
had to bring it right back, but people don't want to look like they don't know what they're saying.
You're right.
But imagine facing a wall of up and downs and bell curves and analytics and charts, especially new teammates or maybe more junior members of your team. You are not enabling them to make smart, self-guided decisions around what to do next. If they're nervous, if they're intimidated by this work, I think the work we can be doing as leaders is making a safe decision-making space for our teams, especially the next generation, to help them kind of get over the nervousness and the courage that they need to find to raise their hand. But the phrase is like, are you raising your hand or sticking your neck out? It should never feel the same, right?
Yeah.
You should feel like you're healthy. There's like me being wrongest in the room. You should feel like, okay, great, I have another question.
Yeah.
Not this guy again. But like, I want to see more people in the room asking those questions so that everyone leaves the room feeling like they know what they need to do next. They have the info they need, but we're nervous. We're nervous to ask these days. And it's a leadership issue.
Yeah. And I hear a lot of, our teams have autonomy to make decisions. Our teams have autonomy to make decisions. It's like, okay, if they really have autonomy to make decisions, then you have to accept failure as part of their decision-making process and support them to learn, right?
Yeah.
So, so you've run a quadrillion experiments. I know every time I jumped on a call where you were speaking with the students, and obviously conversations I've had with you, I'd like you to touch on like your approach to running experiments in a sense. Like what are some of the key things, the deciding factors before running a test? Because tests could be timely, costly. What are like the key attributes to look for?
It's a big question.
I know it is. I
sure.
know it is. And so but for the audience listening in, I just want to give them some, from the expert who's run this a lot.
Yep.
There's probably a logical approach, let's say.
Yes, there is. So let me start my answer to this very complex question with every team test.
Sorry for
different. That's fine, and it's a great question to ask. It's the reason I have work, because there's a lot of work to do here.
Yeah.
Every team is going to test differently. That's what I find fascinating about this. No two clients have ever been the same.
Yep.
And I don't just mean tools, dashboards, whatever. I mean the way they think about problems, the customers that they solve. I've worked with competitors, and they have entirely different approaches to even the product they put into market. Like it's very different. So first, understand your team's capabilities, your values or goals. And I know how sometimes woo-woo this sounds. I know you want to run a test, but you have to get the foundations right. So first, ask those questions. What are we trying to move? Are we skilled enough to actually do this? We use a framework at Intuit called CDI, which is customer-driven innovation, but it's a 3-bubble Venn diagram of sort of capability. Does the market want this? And can we actually do it? So there's viability, which is this actually in demand in the market and a problem we can solve? There's capability being, can we build this? There are times when we can't. We come up with a solution. Maybe it's a price that we can't justify. Maybe it's a feature we can't build in time. Capability is very important. So you're always checking, can we do it? And then there's sort of the more empathetic, like, should we do it?
Right.
We've all heard of dark patterns. We've heard of traps. We've heard of things that lock you into something you don't want to be locked into. I hope that as a leader, you're sharing the values with your team, that we don't want to do something that's going to put the customer in a bad position.
Sure.
How we behave in the dark is very important. So the third bubble is, should we do this? Like, is this good?
Yeah.
Are we benefiting the world? If those 3 things are checks, then go ahead. Let's start doing that experiment. Next, I'd want to make sure you have evidence. We talked about evidence. Evidence is really important because, especially in a team that has either a runway, like a startup, or seasonal businesses or businesses on a really crunch timeline, you can't afford to just test everything. Traffic is precious. So to run an experiment that you're not sure about or might have a small result, you risk running what I call a bad test. And there's only one type of bad test, George, and that's a test that doesn't give you an answer. That's a flat or an inconclusive test.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about being wrong.
Yeah.
You run a test and it bombs and doesn't work. Great. Pin it to the wall, learn from it, share it, talk about it.
Learn.
Again, encourage your team to do that and to fail. But it's on your path, and there should be a decision tree, and I can help teams model what their decisions might look like. In my case, my best wins in my entire career, my best experiments of the however many bajillion I've run, they all came from iterations of failures. I can only think of 2 tests that won on their first try. I was right. By the way, we never say I was right. I like to tease, but we don't say I was right. We'll talk about that. But we say that idea was right. But there were only a handful of tests that actually came out positive and won on the first try. Every other big win, double-digit growth, like record-setting growth at Intuit. I think I designed Intuit's best ever converting pricing page as a result of fail. I think version 7 was the one that blew it open.
Wow.
Right? And it's tweaks. Sometimes it's tweaks. And this is where the skill comes in. And you ask what leaders do. This is where a little bit of experience and skill matters, to know the difference between this still has merit and legs and we can continue with this. We just have to change our approach, and understanding, we've missed something fundamental here. We're missing a value prop. We're not touching the right customer here. We maybe have misappropriated the problem. You need a little experience to know when that's the issue, and whether you steer your team back towards, okay, try again, maybe design it a bit differently, maybe present it differently, maybe we're not targeting properly. The worst thing you can do is run an experiment that wastes weeks or months of traffic to give you a flat or inconclusive 0 result. You waste your time, you waste your team's time, and in a sense, even your customer's time, because they've been through that experiment to no benefit.
Yeah. So what I loved about that approach, especially the Intuit example, where the pricing page iteration was iteration 7.
At least,
yeah. Right. I think oftentimes people get deterred once they don't see what they expect the outcome to be right away. Right. So there's this real struggle with, like, oh man, like, we're 3 weeks into this. We put a bunch of advertising dollars towards this thing, and we're not seeing it. Where the likelihood is they're looking at the wrong things.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of managing up in this business.
For sure.
Right.
And
So, leaders who want to run great experiments with their teams, if they're already doing it, they're learning how to do it. I think it came as a bit of a shock to me, certainly, how much of my week, a lot more than I expected, was actually spent setting the table, setting expectations, showing what's possible, what's not. There's a lot of that work before you even get into design and solutions, that kind of thing.
And so just to kind of expand on that example with this 7-8 iterations, you have a specific objective and an outcome that you're seeking, and you've designed this page with that outcome in mind. What are you looking at iteration 2 and 3 and 4 and so on to say, you know what, we're on to something here. This is working, albeit we're not there yet, but we're on to it.
Sure. Pricing page is a good example.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I probably have a better example to use to illustrate this point.
Sure.
Intense competitive pressure a certain year. Wealthsimple came up as the major tax competitor to Intuit. A lot of response. And so as a result of having to figure out how we could possibly offer a hyper competitive free product, but also, even though that's a more attractive product now, the free one, also increase revenue per visitor, revenue per user, meaning shuffling free users and new users into paid products. It's kind of a double-edged sword there, right? Like, there's a fine balance to walk. So huge effort on Intuit's part, multi-team effort to kind of design a brand new process, but we emptied everything. We started from zero. We went from 12 products, 12 SKUs down to 3, just get to the basics and ask a series of participants, what do you think? What do you need to learn about this? What would solve your tax problems? How are you feeling? And in so doing, what we found was there were some assumptions we had made about our entire suite of products that were unfounded, and it didn't really have any evidence behind them. And we had made a whole lot of funnel and onboarding decisions with the idea that customers wanted a certain level of like permutations and tests. So we scrapped it all down. Version 1 of this pricing page was blank. Nothing on there. No titles, no prices, importantly, no just features, just sets. And we sort of had to design your own. What would you want out of this? The craziest insight from that first round was the majority of customers who said they were willing to pay, there's my pay audience, the people who were willing to pay for a product would, with very few exceptions, would very rarely classify themselves as the far right, hypothetically most expensive option, even though there's no prices. They would never accept that because they thought their life, their tax situation, and their product needs would never demand something that could be considered third tier.
Sure.
So suddenly, with this insight and some more tests, we realized our challenge wasn't necessarily designing the best free product. We actually had to design the best middle product. That's where most of our paying customers saw themselves. They didn't see themselves in the third option. So that was phases sort of 2 and 3, right? How do we do that to make sure we can retain paid customers? And finally, moving into that, often it comes down to design tweaks. It can be small little elements that make all the difference in usability. So it does tend to be those big boulders first, like what product are you interested in? And as you move up into your iteration, it can be more design-based tweaks, more messaging, more copy. It can be. And that always comes second. I hope I've made that clear throughout this, that comes second when you get there. A different test, but one that was a rocker, was a mobile comparison widget that we used. We had just buried the button. We forgot on some devices and some phones. I don't know, you get there when you move fast. We noticed that, whatever it was, iPhone, 10, 11, was the only device that wasn't converting into paid or something like that. That's wild. Why is that not on?
Yeah, why? I don't know.
Look, this is why segments matter. We'll talk about segments, the next most important thing you can do. We realized that on those devices, you couldn't get there. You couldn't get to the pay now button, so to speak. So it's those tweaks and those observations and like looking into the segments and digging to uncover all the dirt that finally does it. That tweak and a few others managed to get us into double-digit growth. It was massive for us. 23% increase in mobile conversions.
Amazing when a simple UX update.
You just have to you just have to tweak it. Yeah.
Observing it though, and knowing what to observe, right, is critical.
We got it wrong a bunch of times too.
Yeah.
We misinterpreted. Yeah.
So in terms of cadence and velocity or frequency, like how often are you running like check-ins on the experiments? Like, and depends
on your maturity level.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on your maturity level. So there's a great book actually. Stefan Tomke, he's ex Harvard. He writes a great book. I reread it every year. He's foundational in his thinking around organization styles and team orgs. If you're interested in starting an experiment practice in your company, start with that book. He talks about the challenges you have in sort of the pod systems and getting into more like a center of excellence type of progress. Yeah, you want to make sure that you understand the capabilities of your team, the skills, and the things you're trying to move. And if you're organized and set up in a way to run those experiments, cadence changes. We were meeting far more often as a stand-up and a ritual thing in the beginning as we sort of found our feet and got used to it. And we actually reduced those. We went from, I think, daily to twice a week. Just to get the check-ins, because people get more skilled. They understand what's expected of them. They know what quality looks like, and you can reduce that a little bit. But I would say if you're starting, lean into a little more, more frequent, and give your team the autonomy and the skills they need to get through the repetitions. Then there's guardrails. Some teams might use what I call like a quality council or steering meeting. Again, I say this a lot. I want to eliminate barriers and I want to eliminate debate, but sometimes based on the space you're in, maybe you're in legal or you're in finance, you have some constraints and some compliance issues. You may want to have a gate where there's a series of leaders who are trained, they know what to look for in an experiment, and you have to pass a gate to let the experiment go live and so on. And that's okay. You can control for that. Tell us where you used to work. Did this really well for brand? Tell us gives a hoot about their leopards and their parrots and their brand. And so they wanted to make sure everything was tightly controlled and that it met standards. You can do that for experiments as well. And you should. It's a risk
guidelines, right?
Mitigation thing. Guidelines and teaching. I encourage leaders to use that as a teaching environment and less a, you didn't do this, come back. You don't want them to come back. You want them to be able to launch pretty much right away after you do that. So if your team needs that level of governance, you can run a meeting where there's senior leaders in the room coaching on what makes a good test passable. I would encourage you to get rid of that meeting when you feel like you're ready to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Less is sometimes more, like give you time to do other things. But so another thing that I'm sure people tuning into this and watching are asking themselves, well, this all sounds great, but I don't have the kind of TELUS budget and I don't have Intuit money to spend. Like, how does budget play a role in how much experimentation you can do? And, so like that will come up in conversation.
For sure.
Like, you can run experiments that cost a lot of money. And
you can.
And you can might even be able to do them lean in your experience. And like, what do you see out there? Like, where does that fine line sit?
I can answer this a bunch of different ways. You can always experiment is my blanket answer. You can always do it. Again, if you're thinking experiments and you're thinking hopping into structured split tests and A/B tests right away, I'm going to pump the brakes again. I know I'm repeating myself, but there's so much work and insight you can get from doing low cost Zoom level interactions and meetings. And surveys aren't quite great, but if it's what you can do at the time, it's enough. It's enough evidence. It's a low grade evidence, but it's evidence to help you make better decisions. But this is such a growing space, George. There's so many teams and companies and leaders realizing how important it is to make decisions with evidence and so on, that the space right now, I mean, in fact, one of my top tools, VWO, just merged. They joined A/B Test Tasty as a way to like build a better product and help serve an even bigger audience, because Optimizely, probably the incumbent in the space, they're massive, they're growing, and they're having a year. So it can be expensive to take sort of top level tools, but underneath those big level tools that I'm used to with Intuit money, as you said, I work with clients who are much smaller and they can afford some of the smaller tools. And this whole process is quite tool agnostic. As long as you have the capability to answer, is this better than this? Do we have evidence from customers that tell us, like our customers, tell us this is what they want to see, and if we could present with something like this, they'd be interested, and we go and build that prototype, we go build that. Your stack needs to have three major capabilities: measurement, like an A/B testing tool; prototyping, so build something not real. With no code these days, it's easier than ever. And you have the ability, like I mentioned before, to answer in the room. So whatever level of data you have, it has to be accessible in the minute. Those are the three ingredients I would say are the most important in your tech stack. So choose any variety of free or almost free tools you want. I would say my pro tip in this space for tools, the first tier of paid for some of these tools is often entry. If you can afford, as you're running experiments, and scale back when you're working on building the next thing, the second tier for a lot of these tools unlocks massive growth. The ability to hyper target, the ability to like wait for triggers and so on. There are a lot of features behind the first tier for some of these platforms. So I'd encourage you to find a tool. Don't go for the tool where you can afford the entry level tier, but it's a bigger tool. Go for the smaller tool and go for their like mid-level plan, because they often unlock features that you really need to use to be precise.
Yeah, it's funny. We also run experiments, obviously a lot of A/B testing, and I remember using one of our clients. We had designed an interface for them, and it was going to be launched. And they're like, "No, this is not going to resonate with the audience and whatever." And we're like, "Okay, well let's go and poll a large
Mhm.
audience and see what they think." And then we basically framed it as like, it was like I think it was a 5 or 7 second rule, like where it would flash.
Yeah, 5-second test. Yeah,
A 5 second
it's a great
test,
test. Yeah.
awesome test. And it was like, okay, here it is. Here's the thing. What does this company do? And I think we polled about 100 people. It wasn't a massive number, but it was enough to get us a sample size.
Yeah.
And almost all of them answered it accurate. I think it was like 95% of the audience. So we went back to the leadership of that company. We said, hey, like, this is going to work, and here's why. And sure enough, we launch it, and sure enough, it works, and sure enough, they see business grow. But had we not done that experiment, we may have been forced to change what we had come up with as marketers.
Totally.
Based on the lack of evidence.
Totally.
It was just like gut and intuition. No, I don't like it. It's like, well, it's not really for you. It's for your customers. And I get this a lot. It's like, yeah, I know you like it or you don't like it.
Yeah.
And that's very subjective, but we're going based on what your customers are asking for.
Well, actually, I love your example. Let me hop onto your example and steal it for me,
Yeah.
because I think that's a great illustration of what leaders can demand of their teams to go get evidence. So what you found in a 5-second test. So for your listeners, a 5-second test is a great experiment where you're testing for understanding, and we'll get back to boldness. Bring me back to boldness, okay? We'll talk about boldness and whether you can actually see and remember a change.
Let's stick to understanding first.
So to run a 5-second test and get whether or not your customers understand it. So yeah, they flash a message or a screen or a value prop in their face. They read and they scan in whatever pattern they can, and they take away something.
Yep.
Is that something, the thing we want them to take away is the value or the features? It's a great test, but it's just testing for understanding. So again, as you talk about measurement and so on, that's a great, to be fair, low level of evidence for a team to make a decision.
Yep.
As a leader now, what you can say is, that's great. We belong spending more time in this space now to go figure out if this is real. But my prerogative is growing revenue. I'm not confident that customers who now understand our value prop, thank you very much, are necessarily willing to pay. That's your next experiment. That's why there's a roadmap of experiments.
For sure.
We now understand that they're willing to pay for this thing that they do understand. And that's a great sequence.
Yeah.
Now we can run some pricing experiments. Now we can run some willingness to pay, mock sales, they call it a fake door test, where there's not a real product yet, but they are willing to pay for it. Those sorts of experiments are wonderful because they tell you the next thing in your ladder of what you want to provide, right? If you're going to go launch a whole new product, wouldn't you want to know they understand it, the problem exists, it's a painful problem, it can be solved, they understand the solution, they're willing to pay for it, and gosh, even letters of intent if it's like a B2B. Like it'd be great to know that before you hit go on engineering to say go and build the product. You can do all of that work before any engineer has to code, or today, not code. I think,
Command.
Yeah.
So
you should be doing that work. And what a great use of your time. You can do that. Mid-sized orgs, you can do that in a couple of weeks. Slower, smaller teams who just don't have the resources probably take you a couple of months to run that type of like cycle with confidence. You can, and you should.
And let's touch on boldness.
Boldness. Oh my goodness. I love this.
I brought it back.
Thank you. I lost it already. Boldness. So the 5-second test is actually one of the ones I use for this. Here's the non-intuitive thing that marketers, present company included, often forget in terms of like, it's a dynamic that we're not used to. Marketing's hard, George. You might not know this. I saw the awards coming in, so some more than others. But yeah, marketing's hard, and we don't always know what to expect on the other side of our efforts and our campaigns. We're used to working really hard and putting a lot of work into a great campaign that moves the needle. When you run an experiment in your market to see if A is better than B, it takes less time to get a conclusive result on a great result. It takes less time, less testing, less energy to get a confident result when you've nailed it, when you've hit something really big. And it's counterintuitive to us because we're used to having to wait for our results. You want to be wrong or right really fast. The way you run a bad test, which is one where you don't learn anything and you waste everybody's time, is it comes back flat and inconclusive, and the math behind it says, can't tell. Can't tell there's a difference here. I don't know. Trouble is you could be right. Right? But you won't know, and you'd either have to rerun it or don't do it at all or drop it.
And sometimes the phrasing of what you're trying to run, right?
It comes down to boldness.
Yeah, boldness. Okay.
You want to encourage your teams to make such a splash that customers instantly see the change. Or, by the way, they're not comparing because your audiences are separate, but the reaction is strong enough that there's a real signal in your market. And that way you need fewer samples, which translates to fewer days running the experiment. You need fewer samples to see a big result or a big flop than you do a small one. So ditch the nerves, encourage boldness, encourage creativity, run George's 5-second test. So you're going, yeah, this is meaningfully different than what we designed before. This is also, when we talk about sequencing, this is the sort of thing we talk about when it comes to sequencing experiments.
Yeah.
Run the 5-second test for your prototype before you put it in market.
For sure.
Is this meaningfully different to you? It is? Great. Push them live, run an A/B test. And now you're testing something bold. You can get a really great result in weeks, or even if you're running like big volume, like into it, in days. For those teams, I even caution the other direction. I say, keep it running.
Yeah.
You might run, by the way, statistical significance, which is the phrase meaning we can repeat this result with 95 or 99% confidence.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah.
Statistical significance just means you can see this result again confidently.
Yeah.
You can see a bad result again, George. You can see fraud marketing, bad value prop. We totally missed it. We did something bad for our customers. You can see that as well. And it will be statistically significant just in the butt end.
That is one of my favorite things to actually see, because like, let's never do that again.
Right.
Let's put that one deep in the shelf.
Yes.
And never pull it out again.
We still need to do big, bold, good marketing. The research matters. The decision-making matters. We all still have jobs because we still have to do great marketing.
Yep.
We can't use an experiment as a crutch to say A is a little bit better than B. No, we have to do great, bold, researched, evidence-based marketing and then test that as quick as possible.
Without question. I've got a few more questions
Sure.
for you, and I thank you so much for being here, because I love this conversation.
Me too.
When it comes down to, you run workshops, obviously, for marketing teams. What's the first marketing ritual most teams need to kill right off the bat?
To kill.
Yeah.
Gosh, probably those endless debate meetings where leaders feel like they have to make all the decisions.
Yeah.
By the way, for better or for worse, I know your audience, a lot of the leaders in the space don't want to be making all the decisions.
Yeah.
I would say any meeting where it's sort of a go, no-go decision, I would challenge you as to whether or not you can set up your principles and values and your process in such a way you can to let your team go and make those decisions in a structured way so that you don't have to be the person constantly delaying and waiting to have everybody filter into the room. But expensive meetings.
Yeah.
It's expensive for time as well if you have to wait to make a decision to go.
Yeah.
I would say those are the meetings we've got to ditch first, and then build in the rituals into your team where people have the skills and the talent and the decision-making authority. Even stakeholders, they play a big part in this.
Sure.
Stakeholders should play an early and a regular part of evaluating the prototype that you're working on.
Yeah.
To say go launch, because that way you can point to people and say, we got a yes from legal, we got a yes from brand, we got a yes from these people. They've all signed off on this prototype. We're going to launch it on Thursday. Why would a leader need to intervene? You've done all the steps. You checked all the boxes. Those are the principles you wanted in place, and they've checked the boxes. Go run.
I mean, you run a business, I run a business. There are moments where I feel like I need to make a decision, but my preference is to tell myself, and I truly believe this, it's not that I tell myself, I sit there with the people that I work with and I say, they're better at this than I am. Why would I not
Totally
give them the opportunity to bring up an idea and a suggestion? And the moment that clicked in my mind, probably about 10 years ago, I'm like, wait a second, I'm hiring these experts for a reason because they're the experts. I'm not. Everything started to change, in terms of the better. Like, good decisions were being made. The right strategies were being put in place. We were looking in the right places for the outcomes that we wanted as an organization. And I emphasize that everywhere I go now. It's like, wait a second, you've got a whole team of marketers, but you're the guy running the business. You may know what you want as the business owner, but these are the folks who are feet on the street. They're hearing what's going on, the conversations with your clients. Like, give them a forum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's not happening in your org, dear listener, I would encourage you to question whether your team feels empowered or courageous enough to raise their hand and say, I think I know the answer here. Why don't we try this?
Yeah.
I think you may want to suggest maybe the idea of idea ownership can be something that's often in an org not quite ready to fail gracefully. Idea ownership means George's idea of doing this on the landing page didn't work.
Right.
George takes a back step. He's on his back foot. It's George's idea. George's feelings are hurt because why not? Of course they are. We're human.
Yep.
But if George volunteers an idea, which by the way are commodities and we'll all get to the same ideas eventually given our lenses, but if an idea is just that, you offer it to the team, suddenly the idea, not George's, that we can all collaborate on, and we can all see ourselves in, and we can all partially own, which is great. That becomes something we can challenge, and we can pick apart a little bit without hurting anybody else's feelings, getting defensive, and by the way, making decisions that are more defensive about preservation and, well, it won in this stat, but even though we're driving revenue, but what over here, and false wins. If you can separate ownership and like naming things, and this is what leaders have to do too. Stop calling it Bob's test. Really. Call it give it a dumb name, the pigeon test, or whatever. Just put a name to it. And release people of the burden of having to win because they want to look good and not look dumb.
Last question.
Sure.
You work with a lot of CMOs and C-level executives who likely have marketing teams as well. When you go in and the first instinct is we brought you in because of what we've heard about you, or we understand what you do, and we think we need you. What is the one question that you try to get through to the C-level suite folks to ensure that they're asking the marketing team? Like, if you're working directly with the C-suite, which I do oftentimes, I'm sitting there with the C-suite, I'm like, you've got a marketing, have you ever asked them about X?
So just to make sure I'm clear, you want to know what a leader can be asking their team?
Of their team, yeah.
How do we know?
How do we know?
How do we know? I mean, again, this is going to depend a bit on org maturity.
Sure.
If your team already feels safe to run experiments and make decisions on their own, I'd say the best question a leader can ask is what's next.
Okay.
Because you can get to a point where you've either got a result or a bad result. And if you haven't planned accordingly and you haven't set up sort of that roadmap of decisions, that's your prompt.
Okay.
You failed. Woohoo. Great. What are you doing next? What are you doing with that? And if your team doesn't have that reaction yet, it's okay for you to spur them on. Your reaction as a leader to that failure is very important emotionally and cognitively to your team. If your team is new to this, great. You're the guys I want to help. If you guys are new to this and you don't know how to fail gracefully and so on, the best thing you can do as a leader is just champion that first result, win or lose or whatever, and make them feel safe and let them know you did great. What did you learn leading to what's next? What did you learn? What are we doing next? Why did you feel that way? What's your interpretation of this? And help people feel comfortable being uncertain and being wrong, and let them open up with, well, I really thought this would work because, and what I found is this, and we didn't look over here. And you don't have to say much else. You have to let them run on with their idea and make them feel safe to make those decisions and say, great, I believe you. It sounds like you're on the right track. Let's keep in mind, we're focused on this, not that. Try again. Let's do the next thing. What do we think we can do better next time?
Every when you talk, everything that comes out of you is so empathetic. You're really thinking about how do I, you did this thing. Here's the, this direction. Like the empathy just oozes out of you, man.
It changed me, George. I truly believed I was getting into a world of dashboards and numbers and math and so on. I really thought, and I was excited about it. I spent so much less time there than I really would have thought. I spend so much more time helping leaders use the right language and help build sort of some grace and patience in teams and operationalize. My best stat ever, the one I'm the most proud of, is at the end of a year of reorganizing and finding new rituals, new language, cutting the executives out of the equation for a while. They had some oversight, but less. After all those changes, we asked Intuit folk at the beginning of the year and at the end, how confident are you in your team's ability to innovate on a customer problem and put a real solution to it? It started at 6.1 and we got to 8.1 in a year. That's a team self-reflection saying, I think we're better at this now. I think we're better at making strong customer-based decisions. Like, I want to do that everywhere. Imagine how everybody feels, how the next generation feels, equipped, ready, confident, eager, creative. That's where it starts. You can run as many tests or blinds or multivariates or AI-led tests you want, but you're not going to get to the meat of it until you really feel like your team's making strong decisions, you're oriented the same way, and you're designed to help and empathize with each other or your customers.
I mean, that alignment is so important. One other question is popping up.
Sure, go for it.
We're talking about this and I'm like, okay, so false positives. How do you handle those?
Okay. We as humans are engineered to avoid those. Snake in the grass. What's worse? Thinking that there's a snake there and not doing anything about it, or being cautious and going, I'm gonna back off. Right? That's a type 1 error. So the idea that we think there's a signal when there isn't one is burned into our psyches as instinct because we want to avoid danger before we want to accept danger, and that's fine. And You might not think our caveman brains still come out in the boardroom, but boy, do they ever. Sorry to tell you.
Yeah.
We still act like our inner child in even those defensive meetings. That's who's talking to us when we're feeling defensive. It's our younger selves who learn to be defensive and react to things. Calm that. George, I teach breathing before my experiment classes. Truly. I teach deep breathing to help calm the amygdala, stop being defensive, and actually think about, what do I need to think about this? How do I need to react to this? Who do I need to be in this moment to answer this properly? That's very important.
That's interesting.
I know, but it's very important.
Yeah.
How do we collaborate in this? How do I stop getting defensive? A type 1 error in the data is the idea that there's a signal there when there isn't. Type 2 is the opposite. Like we think there is one when there isn't. If you want to prevent an expensive decision in a startup environment, especially, it's with big budget in the corporate, this is less of an issue. But startups, this is deadly in both directions. I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah.
Investing in a signal where there isn't one means you're wasting funds, money, time, whatever, on a runway that's limited. If you think there's a signal there and you've misattributed a false positive and you're chasing something that's not really a signal, you're spending time, energy, resources on a ghost, right? And you're not going to grow there, as opposed to the other opportunities that are out there for you. Type 2 is the opposite, right? Type 2 is, we missed it.
Yeah.
We thought there was nothing there, but there really was. In fact, what we need to do is we should be investing in channel, segment, feature set, competitive advantage, whatever. Like if we've missed that signal, it's just as deadly. You've missed that growth curve. So you have to become really good at determining what's a real signal and what's not. And it all comes back down to evidence. It comes down to what do we need to know, what's important to us. In startups especially, which the worst is they're the least equipped for it.
Yeah.
Budgets, tools, technologies, traffic. It's hard. That's why I like to work with those teams. Well, nobody has patience. Nobody anymore. I don't even have patience. So not a prerequisite in this business. But it's tough. It's tough out there. I encourage people to, as you said, focus on the team building, the empathy first, so you know where we're all heading. You're making the same types of decisions. By the way, diversity of thought couldn't be more important these days, especially with AI. We want diversity of thought. The difference between homogeny and like sameness on a team, diversity of thought, and a structured set of principles is that this is how we want to behave. These are the sorts of guardrails we have, but go nuts. Take your lens, share what you think, add input in a structured way, in a way that doesn't offend, doesn't hurt feelings.
Of course.
But we want that diversity of thought. So I'm not promoting like a singleness, but I am promoting
bring your ideas
ritual.
to the table, right?
Yeah.
And have a forum where people can do that effectively.
Right. If you're nervous about giving your team that autonomy, you mentioned false positives, how will they interpret it the right way? Again, I bring it back. It's a skill. This is not something I learned a great phrase last week from Terry Real. He's the relationship coach. He calls himself, and I think he's right, the world's most expensive marriage counselor, which when you think about it, it's a pretty good flex. He has a great phrase. He says, you have, in your relationship, you have filet mignon ambitions, but you're cooking with hamburger skills, which let's not knock hamburgers, but I totally understand where he's coming from, and leaders and founders in the space, that's a great quote.
Yeah.
You might want to get to here. You might have ambitions to grow a whole new practice, or we've talked about all the different big decisions CMOs need to make. Please pay attention. Are you cooking with hamburger skills, or do you actually have what it takes to get there? And you could just hire it, but I think the best thing and the work that I want to do is you teach your existing team who love your product, you've built relationships, you've got bonds and trust. They can learn this. It's a learned skill. So skill up.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
That's incredible. Now, for the audience watching and everything you've said today, if people want to learn more, find you, where do people find you? How can people learn more about what it is you do?
Sure. You can find me at formentor.ca, which is named after the highest cliff I ever had to scale driving in a little 6-speed, because I was proud of myself getting to the top and I was scared to do it. And just like starting a business, I was terrified to do it.
Yeah.
I was scared and I did it anyway.
It'd be a terrifying thing.
I named it after the emotion I felt when I got to the top.
Amazing.
Formentor.ca, and everywhere. Find me on LinkedIn, find me on podcasts like this one, where I'm trying to spread a message of use science, use empathy, grow your business, start with the foundations. And I'm starting a newsletter. I'd love to say that. I'm calling it Wrongest in the Room because that's what I want you to be. Feel safe being wrong. And we'll talk about all the different poor decisions and good decisions we can make along the way.
And when is that launching?
Last week, actually.
It launched?
Last week, yeah.
All right. Sign up to the newsletter.
That's it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And we can get the newsletter on Formentor?
You can get it on Formentor. I've got a Substack.
Okay.
We'll start there.
Cool.
And I'm teaching teams the different ways they can participate, even if they don't feel skilled enough to do it, how they can make a difference and grow.
Amazing.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for being such a great guest. I hope you all learned something. Get out there, experiment. Leaders, allow your teams to experiment. Let them fail, because you'll learn a tremendous lot about what's going on in the market and your business. Thank you so much for being here, Michael. Thanks for shooting this. Have a great day, everybody. See ya.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Michael. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of it, please like, subscribe, or share it with your friends.